Hi, I'm Femi OK. Today on The Stream, we bring you an underreported story from the Sahel region of Africa. According to the United Nations, 18 million people are at risk of starvation over the next few months. We are going to unpack how conflict, climate change and COVID have impacted the vulnerable people in the Sahel and what can be done to bring them relief. We start with Hawa's story.
It was at dusk that the armed jihadists who scour the area came. They made all the men gather under the pretext that they had to attend their preaching, but their intentions were quite different. Instead, they sorted out 5 men whom they took to execute away from the village. Then they came back, brandishing their weapons, and summoned us to leave under penalty of killing us all. We fled, leaving everything behind.
We have such a good panel for you, audience. We have Halimatu, Ornella, Olo, all know about the Sahel region of Africa. Halimatu, welcome. Please introduce yourself to our viewers around the world.
Hi, my name is Halimatu Amadou. I'm the spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross, and I'm based in Dakar.
Good to have you. Ornella, welcome to the stream. Please say hello to our viewers around the world.
Hi, my name is Ornella Moderan. I work with the Institute for Security Studies as program head for the Sahel, based in Bamako, Mali.
Good to have you. And Olo, welcome to the stream. Tell us who you are and what you do. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name is Olo Sib, and I'm working at WFP as a senior regional assessment and monitoring advisor.
Oh, good to have you. All right, you've seen the level of expertise that we have at your fingertips. If you're watching right now on YouTube, your comments, your questions are very welcome. Put them right here in the comments section. Olo, and guess, I'm just going to show an area of the Sahel region right now where there is food insecurity. Basically, people do not know necessarily where their next meal is coming from. That's all that means, which is a big deal. Chad, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. Olo, you're looking at this, you're nodding at this map here. Tell us a story from one of these countries that really helps us understand what is going on.
I mean, thank you. I had the opportunity to travel across the region and due to my position. And recently I was in Burkina Faso, that was in February. And I had the opportunity to travel in a very remote area called Waiguia, and in that remote area, I had the opportunity to talk to communities, people, farmers, livestock keepers, who have been uprooted for more than 2 years, so internally displaced people. And in the Sahel, we are talking about 7 million people who have been displaced for the last 4 or 5 years. And those people we met, and we understand what means food insecurity. We are talking about people who are not able to have 1 or even 2, maximum 2 normal meal a day. We are talking about people who have been uprooted and they left behind all their belongings. They left behind the land that they used to cultivate. They left behind the livestock that they used to have, and those people now are relying heavily on the international community generosity, on the humanitarian aid. We are talking also about people who have heavily been affected by multiple shocks, climate shocks. Food production has substantially decreased for many of them due to adverse climate conditions, drought recorded last year. We are talking about people who are suffering of soaring food price. When I went there, and they were telling me the story of the livestock keepers who used to normally sell goats to buy food, and now with 1 goat that they will be selling in the market, they can't even get 1 bag of cereals, which is normally what they need to at least feed their family for an
entire goat, Olo. And people are selling, are trading livestock now because there's not enough money to use to buy items. Let me just bring in Halimatu. Halimatu, as Olo was speaking, you were nodding. Tell us more. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been also to Burkina Faso, and it's one of the countries I think where the situation is really worrying. There are more than 1 million people, almost 2 million people displaced in this country. So it's about 10% of the population, and it's mainly women and children. And it has been a crisis that has been going on for years now. And when I was also, I went to Waidia and also to other places in Fadangoma, and I'm really amazed by the solidarity of the communities because it's really a hidden crisis. You don't see big camps like in some African countries. People are really sharing houses with local communities. Who are really welcoming them, but it's becoming more hard and hard for also those host communities now who are put under pressure. So those people who are fleeing rural areas are now moving towards urban cities where they have to share access to water, access to land, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for everyone, I would say.
Yeah, Ornella, earlier we spoke to Jose. He's a Sahel data analyst, and he gives us some figures which shows that the crises in the Sahel are getting worse. Here's Jose, and I'd really love to get your take on what has been, or what are the factors that are making the situation worse for the people in Sahel than they have been in previous years. Here's Jose.
The frequency and deadliness of armed violence has been trending upwards in the so-called Central Sahel countries of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. According to ACLED data, 2020 and 2021 registered the highest annual death tolls in a decade. Worryingly, the violent targeting of civilians by armed actors is on the rise, with close to 6,000 civilians killed in the last 3 years, mainly along the Liptako-Gourma border area, where a mix of jihadi groups and communal militias carry out attacks. Consequently, according to UNHCR data, close to 2.5 million people have been internally displaced in Central Sahel, representing a fourfold increase relative to 2019, with Burkina Faso alone concentrating 74% of the currently displaced.
Nella, go ahead.
Yeah, so the figures that Jose just mentioned are extremely telling. They tell the story of a region that has been exposed to grave insecurity for the past 10 years now. So this is a security crisis that has been going since 2012. Now, as the years go, it keeps getting worse and worse with the multiplication of armed actors. So we went from a situation with a number of armed actors around mainly political demands at first towards a real proliferation of actors, including, violent extremist and terrorist groups, local militias, and other kinds of actors. In the middle of this,
Ornella, can I just ask you, because we all in the Sahel region, we all talk about armed groups, all these actors, as if they're normal. It's like, what are they doing there?
Well, they're not normal. They are a symptom of what is going wrong in the region. So one of the core issues we have, I believe, is around governance and a crisis of the state structure. So the inability of some of the states in the region to provide access to basic social services, to justice, to security, to food, to water, and so on, over decades and decades, has essentially made it easier for some armed groups with territorial claims actually to take root in specific areas and to actually get the support of communities, or when they don't manage to get this support, then to force people into this kind of support or into displacement. So the level of violence is tremendous. Jose just gave us some very telling figures about violence against civilians, but those figures only tend to capture casualties and displacement and all the core of it. Behind that, there's also the story of those multiple villages that are under siege for months with a complete inability to get out to access the crops so that they can cultivate and eat what they get from the ground, so that they can get access to market, so that they can get access to wells and to water and so on.
Ornella, if I may, can I give people an example? Because when they're hearing us speak, it's really helpful for them to see what we mean. If somebody is pushed on because of an armed group or they're displaced because of an armed group. Here is a farmer who had to move in Burkina Faso, and look where he's having to farm right now. Let's take a look.
We came here because the armed groups chased us out of our village. A good person allows me to farm this piece of land, but because of the lack of rain, the harvests are bad. Our fields in the village are more fertile than the ones here. There are pockets of drought here. The rains don't come all the way. The sorghum I planted did not survive, and I had to plant cowpeas instead, but without success.
Halimatu, I'm just looking at that. Is it a desert? Is it dirt? What is even going on there? That farm is just one of so many people. On YouTube, our audience want to speak to all of you guests. Halimatu, I'm going to put this thought to you. This is from John. Excessive military presence is only dragging the crisis deeper. I know that you have had conversations with some of the armed groups. You try and work with them. Can you tell us how that is going? Is it having a positive impact on people?
Well, it's a long work and that we continue and we try and really to have a dialogue with all sides. It means really that we are trying to influence different sides, all the people that we think can help us spare civilians, protect civilians, or help us have access to places where there are really vulnerable people. It's not an easy task, but it's important to have an independent, neutral organization that is able to have those talks with different armed groups, but also the authorities. So it means really that we have volunteers, teams on the ground who are disseminating what we call the rules of war.
Yeah. Olo, go ahead.
If I may, I mean, while we really focus the discussion on the Sahel, I just want to let you know that the security situation that we have in the Sahel is now also expanding toward the coastal countries. And we saw some attacks in Burkina, in Mali, in Togo recently. And I think this is an important development of the crisis. Second important that we need to look at is that the security situation, the way it's, the development that we have today, the control of the major trade routes is a major source of disruption of market systems in the region, in a region where people rely heavily on market to access food. And I just want to comment on the picture, on the video of the farmer, and I think the discussion here should really be focused on in the space in the area where it's extremely dry. How do we support the systems that are there to allow people to grow food and to grow food and to live in those areas with dignity?
Yes, Olo, I'm so glad you said that, because we can talk about the problems of the Sahel, the challenges of the Sahel for hours on end. What we don't do enough is focus really on, now what do we do? Earlier we spoke to William Mosley, and he had some very practical advice about how do we change the mindset so that the farmer that is digging in dry dirt actually is able to farm crops that are successful. This is what William told us earlier.
Longer term, we need to develop a less energy intensive food system. We need to move away from the export of commodity crops like cotton that use a lot of inorganic fertilizers and focus more on food production of grains that are used in the region, sorghum, millet, maize, using techniques like agroecology, intercropping, locally produced organic fertilizers. This is the long-term solution.
See, that sounds like it's entirely possible. Olo?
It's possible, but maybe let me just share with you a few key numbers.
Yeah.
In 2021, the West Africa region, the Sahel included, the total production was around 73 million tons of cereals produced in the region. And almost 40% of that production was made of maize and 20% made of rice. Millet and sorghum represent very tiny proportion of production in a region where those crops are by nature the most adapted crops for those regions. So I really second what he just said. Yeah. And that's why for WFP, the investment into the resilience system, the resilience program, so that we help people to rehabilitate land, to construct infrastructure, public infrastructure, community-based infrastructure, to keep water storage facilities. It's extremely important because in the Sahel, the major issue remains of water. How do we make sure that water is accessible and used efficiently?
Yeah, the climate has changed. Ornella, I have another thought here.
Can I come up?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Ornella, I was going to put this YouTube question to you, but you go first, and I'll put YouTube to you second. Go ahead.
Great. So actually, on the question that's being discussed, I think here we're really touching at one of the core complexities of the Sahel situation, which is that we have both an emergency situation and a long-term developmental and structural issue. So the proposed options that this expert you just showed presented are indeed very valid in the long term. But I think one of the core questions is, what do we do now? What do we do for that farmer who is actually, as we speak, on the field?
Ornella, what do we do?
There is no time to train him into using different techniques and so on. This is an old person who's been doing this in his homeland for a long time. So I think here again, we come back to the root causes of this crisis and the need to create the safety that's needed for people to be able to return safely to their homes or to reestablish safely in new places. Here we come back to the need for political solutions, really, to a security crisis that is in nature political. And I think one of the challenges that we have, generally speaking, in the international community working in the Sahel is to shy away from the political dimension of things and to really focus on the technicalities, which can help but are clearly not going to solve this crisis.
No, I've got a thought here. There's some despair I'm picking up off YouTube. So I want to go back to YouTube here. The Mazar says billions have been spent on the Sahel. It's hopeless and futile and almost impossible to tackle because it goes beyond solving the food issue. I know that you have a rebuttal, Halimatu. What would you say? It's futile what you're doing, is what the Mazur says. What would you say in response?
Yeah, we can respond slowly to this issue. As RCRC, we are responding to this emergency now, and we have extended our activities now to many countries in Africa. We increase the budget, the operations, but we cannot do it alone. It's an emergency response, and this is why we need also the authorities, different governments, and other actors to step in. It's a really complex situation that needs much more than humanitarian organization. And when we speak also with people on the ground, people who fled, they tell us that they don't want to be, they want their ability back, and they don't want to be waiting for aid to arrive to them. They want to be able to be independent, autonomous. They want to work. They want to get their life back.
Yeah.
If I may, maybe.
Ornella and then Olo. Ornella and then Olo. We don't get enough time to talk about the Sahel, so everyone wants to pile in. Ornella, you go first. Olo, you go second.
So, I just wanted on the back of what Halimatu just said, which I think represents very well the difficulty that humanitarian organizations and just other organizations working to help are facing, which is that the task is Herculean. It's huge. Now, coming back to the remark that this YouTube commenter made, is it futile? I guess the question then is, well, if this isn't enough and you think this is futile, then what do we do? Do we just let the situation keep getting worse and worse? And do we let thousands of people just getting killed every year? Is this what we want? So it is clear to me that the situation is extremely worrying and that it is getting worse. What we don't have, on the other hand, is a counterfactual. We don't know how much worse it would be if nothing was being done.
Sure.
So there is need to keep thinking about the way we do things and to improve it. There is need to keep thinking about the actors we engage with and to make sure that we're talking to the right people.
But
with
this
actual
sounds,
agency,
Ornella,
actual
I'm sorry to push you.
But we have to keep on.
This sounds like blah, blah, blah. We need to think about the actors and we need to think about the way we do things. But what does that actually mean?
That means, for instance, we need to consider talking to the people who are perpetrating the violence.
Good.
We need to talk with armed groups, whether they're considered violent extremist armed groups or not. We need to get to the core of what's going wrong so that the violence can stop at some point.
All right. Ola, I know you're standing by. Can I just bring in one more voice before I come to you? And that's only because when we talk about the Sahel region, we always get sucked into politics. And Eric, who spoke to us earlier, was talking about people and particularly the kids who are enduring food insecurity. Here's Eric.
Today, 14 million people are facing food insecurity in Sahel region. In this region, 1% out of 2 is less than 15 years old. Over 60% of the population is below 18 years old. That's the first victim because they cannot go to school anymore, or sometimes closed, or sometimes when the schools are open, they cannot go there because they don't have been eating anything. Also, that's the first victim because their family, which very often are very poor and living below the poverty line, are developing some coping strategy. They're offering the girls to be married before the age of 18, or the boys will go to join some armed group to get access to new resources.
Ola, what did you want to add?
No, I mean, I just wanted to add a few things and on the more concrete part of this discussion. The first one is to know that the people Eric just described, they don't only need food, they need water, they need access to education, they need. So it's important to provide an holistic response to the need. And the humanitarian response is one part of the solution. Given the severity of the food security situation, the malnutrition situation, is important that we are able, the international community, humanitarian actors, are able to deliver that needed assistance. The second part is to look at that there is what we call now the nexus, but look at the connection and the linkages between the humanitarian, the development, and the peace. And I think, Oneli, what you are talking about on the political side is on the peace side, right? But also let's look at the policy issues in the Sahel, because the political issues are there, but the policy issues also are there. So it's important that the response that we provided to the solution that we provided to the people need, it's come with, let's say, is a package, a package and an integrated package.
Because
to
the
address
crises are multiple, so it cannot be one thing. It's got to be multiple ideas and strategies. I'm going to bring in one more voice, and while I do this, guess I want you to be thinking of why is this region in Africa underreported? Why aren't we thinking about it more often? Why isn't it in the headlines all of the time? Here's Hannah.
We're really seeing that people are increasingly vulnerable. They're having to take action to survive. Some are selling their land, they're selling their homes, they're selling their livestock just to survive. Some are even begging on the streets. We as an international organisation are responding to those emergency needs right now, but more needs to be done. And not only now, but also we need to look to see how we can fix the broken food system. Now, we see that a feminist approach to the solutions is necessary. We need to increase food security and we need to build resilience against climate crisis. We must invest in local solutions and we must invest in women, in girls and in displaced populations, taking a leading role to prevent others from future shocks.
I'm sure there is no argument from any of our panellists right there. In a sentence, Ornella, in a single sentence, why is the Sahel region so underreported? Your thoughts in a sentence. Last word.
Well, I think the situation is just too complex. It's not. It doesn't fit news. Short news formats very well. It's extremely complex. And then there's also the competition, quote unquote, of so many other crises going on in the world.
Ornella, Olo, Halimatu, thank you so much for bringing an underreported story to the stream and Al Jazeera.